Hello guys, welcome back to series of hypothesis testing. As we discussed yesterday, we discussed about hypothesis testing. Now, what is hypothesis testing and why do we need it and how do we do hypothesis testing? So, in the last yesterday video, we discussed that today we will discuss what is null hypothesis and what is alternative hypothesis. So along with that, today we will discuss some very important terminology which are important to do hypothesis testing. So as we discussed yesterday, today we will define what is null hypothesis and what is alternative hypothesis. So null hypothesis is generally uh, the claim which we are doubting. That means suppose if you see in above example, the company claims it reduces 5 kg in a month, so we are not believing that. That is the reason we are going to do the test whether that claim is true or not. So that is null hypothesis. That means, so which we are doubted, it is called null hypothesis. In which we doubted is null hypothesis. Alternative hypothesis, its alternative hypothesis, it's reverse. That means which we are believe, which in we believe. That means here the company claims that it their weight loss drink reduce 5 kg in a month, but we are not believing that. We are suspecting, we are doubting in that. That becomes null hypothesis. Alternative hypothesis, that means we are believing in it is not reducing 5 kg in a month. So that means alternative hypothesis, the claim which in which we are believing in a condition, or else we can say a condition which we are believing in, which we are believing in. So these are the by definitions, if you see, these are the null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis. But we will, based on problem, we will define what is a null hypothesis and what is alternative hypothesis. So in, in yesterday example, this above example, the company claims it reduces 5 kg in a month. Okay, that means, so the company claims, we are not believing. That is the reason we are going to do the hypothesis testing. So here null hypothesis becomes, in statistical terminology, null hypothesis denoted by H naught. So here null hypothesis becomes 5 kg. That means 5 kg. That means in which we are doubting, that is company claimed. And alternative hypothesis is H1 is not equal to 5 kg, or else we can denote it not equal to 5 kg. It's not 5 kg, some others like 4.7, some other else. So that this is the null hypothesis. Null hypothesis in which we doubted. Alternative hypothesis, a condition which we are not believing in. So 5 kg in which we are not believing in, but we are believing in some other except 5, or else 5.1, or else 4.9, 4.7, like something. So and some other terminology also we can see along with this. So what is that? Type 1 and type 2 errors. Type 1 and type 2 errors. So what is mean by type 1 error? First of all, what is mean by type 2 error? So here we will define what is the type 1 error. That means if we reject null hypothesis even if it is true, that is type 1 error. Type 1 error is if we reject null hypothesis even if it is true. That is, we are committing a type 1 error. Okay, type 2 error type 2 error if we fail to reject if we fail to reject when it is false when it is false. So this is a type 1 error and type 2 error. So in type 1 error generally denoted by alpha, that means probability of type 1 error, probability of okay, we will discuss this later. So this is type 1 error and type 2 error. So we will go for next. So what is alpha and what is beta? So alpha and beta are the probabilities of the committing type 1 and type 2 error. Alpha and beta. So alpha and beta are the type probabilities of committing type 1 and alpha and beta are the probabilities of the committing type 1 and type 2 errors. Generally alpha is generally referred as significant level, that is it is generally 0 0.05 or else 0.01. So in general, while testing the hypothesis testing, type 1 error is very riskier than type 2 error. So we morely concentrated on type 1 error, that means alpha, the probability of committing type 1 error. So in general it is 0.05 and 0.01. So and beta is known as committing of type 2 error. So here what is the mean by alpha 0.05? What does it mean by? Does it mean by alpha 0.05? Generally, if we in hypothesis testing, generally alpha is take like 0.05, 0.01. So what does it mean? So 0.05 means, so uh, we are taking a 5% of risk. That means even if it is true, that means we are taking 5% of risk to reject the null hypothesis even if it is true. So that is the meaning of 0.05, alpha 0.05. So another term, p-value. So the p-value is a very smaller significant level. That means alpha is significant level, but p-value is the probability of p-value is the smallest significant level than alpha that leads us to rejecting the null hypothesis. Okay, so but p-value is the probability of the happening of the null hypothesis under the null hypothesis. That means if when p-value is less than, p-value is the very small, this is the smallest significant level that leads us to rejecting the null hypothesis. So based on p-value, so we may reject the null hypothesis. That means if p-value is less than alpha, we may reject the null hypothesis. Reject the null hypothesis. That means, so the we put alpha as a threshold value. That means we put alpha as a an cutoff value. So below that cutoff value, if it is happening still under null hypothesis, the p-value is less than alpha. That means very even our alpha is 0.05, but p-value is less than that 0.05, we may reject null hypothesis. So that is the value of meaning of p-value. That means it is used to reject or fail to reject the null hypothesis. That means it is a probability of happening. Suppose if you take that above example, the company claims it reduces 5 kg in a month. So under null hypothesis, that means h naught is 5 kg. That means if it is h naught is true, if it is h naught is true under at significant level of 5%, if p value is very less than uh, alpha, that means the probability of happening that 5 kg reducing very less means we may reject. That means it is very rare case. That means the probability happening that case is very less than alpha, means it is very rare case, extreme case. So we may reject null hypothesis. That is the use of p value and alpha. So this is and two more terminology we can learn here. What is rejection region? So rejection region, or else before that, we see what is test statistic. So the test statistic, the test statistic or or sample statistic, one uses to either either reject h naught, or not to reject or not to reject h naught. So based on sample statistic, that means so the statistic based on some the for every hypothesis testing there is a formula for every test statistic. So if we calculate that, based on that we find some critical values. So if our critical value is based on tail test less than or greater than, so based on test we may reject or fail to reject the null hypothesis. So that's a test statistics. So now we will see what is rejection region. The set of rejection region, the set of values, for the test statistic, for the test statistic that that leads that leads us to reject null hypothesis. null hypothesis. Non-rejection region and non-rejection region, the set of values not in the rejection region that leads us to not to reject of null hypothesis. The same critical values, these are the critical values. The critical values based on a test statistic and given alpha we may find from the standard normal curve table. So while doing hypothesis testing, I will explain how to take critical values, and critical values may separate rejection region and non-rejection region. So this is a video. These are the some important terminologies to do hypothesis testing. So one simple sample, one simple analysis we can take, a simple problem we can take, and we may once again define what is null hypothesis, and we will learn how to define null hypothesis and alternate hypothesis. By that we may end this video today. So yesterday example, we talked about the smartphone manufacturer claimed that their product lasts longer than 40 months. So here we can define what is null hypothesis. Null hypothesis, null hypothesis H naught is that in which we not believe. That means H naught is generally we are not believing that is last not longer than 40 months. So where it is, yeah. So here H naught equal to mu is not equal to or less than 40. Alternative hypothesis is H1 is its may greater than 40. So this is how we, based on the given problem or the based on the real scenario, so we may define what is null hypothesis and what is alternative hypothesis. So and these are the some important terminology uh, which are useful to do hypothesis testing in future. So by the end of this is the end of this video. Tomorrow we will see so how to do what is the test procedures, and we will talk about what is statistic, what are the types of hypothesis testing. So based on those we may proceed test procedures. So this is the end of this video. Bye bye.